All right, welcome back in. Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey, 609-919-9200. We're going to put the football talk on the back burner for just a bit on a big football Friday because we got a lot going on in the NBA. Sixers in action tonight up against Charlotte in South Philadelphia, and the Knicks coming off a much-needed win last night against the Chicago Bulls. So let's welcome in a man that covers the NBA for FS1, and that is Chris Broussard. Chris, welcome to the show. Thanks for the time, and how are you?
I'm great, man. How are you?
Well, I'm doing great on this Friday, and there is a just unbelievable amount of exuberance right now in South Jersey and in Philadelphia because of one player that Sixer fans have waited a while to see, and he's just been unbelievable in this first half of the season. We're all mesmerized by the process in Joel Embiid. You've seen a lot of big men. You've seen a lot of stars in the NBA. Just how about what's impressed you so far with the first half of Joel Embiid?
Look, like you said, I mean, the guy has been spectacular. I mean, he's putting up numbers that if he were playing 35 minutes a game, we would love. 19.7.5 rebounds, almost 2.5 blocks. But he's doing that in 25 minutes a game. So he's versatile. I mean, obviously he's got stuff inside on the block. He's got mid-range. He's a good three-point shooter. Certainly for his size and position. Defensively, he's, has it all. He's athletic. I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm his PR agent, but the guy looks fantastic. And remember, this is still a guy that hasn't played a lot of basketball. And I don't mean just in the NBA. I mean in his life. So he's still developing. And so, look, the thought of Ben Simmons, if he becomes what we think he can become, and Joel Embiid is just incredible. Them playing together, you surround them with some shooters, some defenders, and you're going to have a team that's going to make you forget these last, 4 years?
It seems like more than 4 years. But you look at Embiid, and you're exactly right. This was someone a few years ago that was supposed to be a volleyball player, not even a basketball player. It's one of the most unbelievable stories you will see. And Chris, this guy is just such a cool, calm, and collective personality. He makes it look so natural, and he's embracing that superstar persona with the All-Star Game voting, the Shirley Temple promotion the other night, and even dancing with the cheerleaders after the win. It's unbelievable, really, what you're seeing, how calm he looks.
Well, he's just having fun. And, early in his career when he was not playing, there was a lot of talk about his immaturity. And, he was immature. And he had some, things he had to come out of. But I think it was just rooted in a fun-loving, easygoing personality. And that's a strength. And you just have to, direct it in the proper way. And I think they've gotten to that point where they've done that with him and he's done that with himself. So he has the type of personality that if he does become what we think he can be, I mean, based on what we're seeing this season, he's going to be not only a superstar player, but he's going to be a superstar personality. I mean, I don't want to compare him to Shaq, but the things that you're seeing, those are things that Shaq did. I mean, the dancing with the cheerleaders, the having fun. Into his whole thing with Rihanna. That's Shaq-like stuff. And so he's going to be a huge personality and celebrity on top of a great player if indeed, I really think it's this, not if he becomes a great player, but if he stays healthy. Because I have very little doubt that he'll be tremendous if he stays healthy.
That's the big key, no doubt about it, as Chris Broussard joins us right now, covers the NBA for FS1. So everyone's waiting for Simmons. I just saw a video a few moments ago, him after practice putting up some threes. When Ben is able to go and be on the court in games, what's your expectation level for Ben Simmons?
I don't want to expect too much. I love Ben Simmons. I think he is a tremendous passer. I mean, I've said it, people have criticized me for it. I think he's a better passer than LeBron James. Now, he's got to go out and do it, but the natural instincts, he reminds me of Magic Johnson. And he's similar, to Matt. I mean, obviously he's got the size, He is a phenomenal passer. He's a pass-first guy, yet he will still get you 19 to 20 points in a game without looking to score. He just can do it. And like Magic, doesn't have the outside shot. The thing about Simmons, and I did an interview with him before the draft, a sit-down interview with him, spent much of the day with him. When he shoots the ball, and he was shooting a lot when I was with him that day, we were in the gym. Now, they didn't go in, all right? But his form is not bad at all. I mean, it looks good. It just doesn't go in. That's a good sign. It's not a broken jumper. It's not like a Michael Kidd-Gilchrist or somebody where he just has no clue on how to shoot a jump shot. And so I think that's a good sign. Look, it'll be interesting to see if they play him exclusively at point guard or they play him more like a point forward. I'd have to see him a little more up close to know what I do. There have been times where I thought, you know what, make him a point guard. That's what he is. But, it may depend on what the personnel is around him. So I think that's one thing I really am interested in seeing. And, again, as great as he is, that jump shot you have to be able to hit that because today, as we see, you can't be a guy that the defenses can lay off. And I don't think they can lay off him because he can still get to the rim and finish. I think if they sit off of him, he'll punish them, but he still needs to hit that jumper just to keep them honest.
Now, you threw out a lot of big names in the comparisons to aspects of these people games, and it's making Philadelphia fans right now just their expectation levels and their excitement go through the roof. Let's say Embiid's able to stay healthy and Simmons is able to develop that shot. Are people going to be lining up to join this thing in Philly?
Well, anytime you have a few things attract players. One, a winning team, okay? Two, a leader who is a willing passer. That's why people go to play with LeBron James because they know, he's the star, he's the face, he's going to get the shine, but he's also going to feed you. You're going to get plenty of shots. People would have loved to have played with Magic Johnson. Kobe, and this is no slight on them, but he's a different type of player. Westbrook, great, both of them. Iverson, another great one. But they don't play. They were scorers first, and they're getting theirs first. And then so they're not as much of a willing passer, and it's not gonna be as fun to play with them, quite honestly. So yes, I do think that players will look at what they're doing. It first started with Brian Colangelo or with Jerry Colangelo, and that changed the perception of the franchise around the league. As you guys know, there were agents that just didn't want to send their guys to Philadelphia and players that didn't want to play there. That's all changed, so that's good for you. Now it looks like you could have a good team in the future, and you've got a leader in Simmons, again, if he becomes what we project, who is going to share the basketball. And if I'm a shooter and this team, these two stars, grow as we think they will. I mean, what could you ask for more than a guy who can play inside and demand attention on the block and a guy who can run the point and distribute the basketball, and that's what he wants to do first? What more could you ask if you're, a great outside shooter? So I do think that their future is certainly bright.
There's still a lot more dominoes to fall, and there's still going to be a lot more players coming in and a lot more players departing. The big debate between the big men, once you get past Joel Embiid, is Nerlens Noel and Jahlil Okafor. Who do you think the Sixers should keep out of those two players?
Yeah, that's a great question. Noel has had, there's challenges with, him thinking he's better than he is. Or not accepting the situation. I've looked at his game, and I think he's a guy that could be a spectacular impact role player, like a Joakim Noah, like a Marcus Camby, who can rebound the basketball, who can, block a shot, who can play with energy, who's athletic, if he can accept that. Okafor, a lot of people down on him. It's kind of a different game. Does it fit his strengths? But he still can be somewhat productive. It's a tough call because I think Okafor has done some good things this season. But I think it would depend on what I could get on the market. Whoever I can get more for that can help my team, that's what it would depend on. Because I think if both guys have the right attitude and can accept that they are not the star and play their role, then I think both of them, you don't need both, but I think each of them by themselves could be an asset to the team. So it really depends on who can get me the most in a trade.
And that's the problem. The Sixers, everyone knows they're so desperate, so people wonder, well, what could they actually get for one of those players? Do you expect at least one of them to get traded from now until the deadline in February?
Well, you just said it. I mean, they've been trying to trade one of these guys for months, since before the draft. So I think what may have to happen is this team may have to have some success. And maybe with those guys playing a decent role. Like if they're having success and starting to win some games and those guys are coming off the bench, or at least one of them coming off the bench and making an impact and showing he's got some value, I think you're going to have to, the stock of each player is going to have to rise a bit for you to get a trade that's worth your while. Look, I'm not going to say it's impossible that one of them could be dealt before the deadline, but at this point, it's not essential, right? You're not doing anything this season. It's all about seeing what you have, developing guys. So unless I get a deal I want, unless I can get maybe a great shooter that I like or some assets for one of those two, then I don't feel like if I'm Philly, I've got to move one of them. And I think that's how they feel too.
Chris, do you think Brett Brown is a good head coach?
Well, it's hard. It's been hard to tell at this point. I mean, I've been impressed by what he's done in a bad situation, but I've talked to people around the league, and they haven't. They said that's what they said to me. They've said at this point, all you can tell is he's a good motivator, because to keep players motivated in a situation where you knew the franchise was trying to lose is tough. Right now, I mean, they don't have. I mean, besides Embiid. A lot of the guys they have playing right now, you're not going to win many games with that. Your best, your draft pick didn't, he's not playing at all. And so I think it's hard to judge Brett Brown right now. I'd like to see him get a shot. What has happened in a lot of situations like this is that a guy goes through the growing pains, and then when the team really is ready to play well, they get rid of him and bring somebody in for a quote-unquote fresh start. I kind of hope that doesn't happen to Brett because I like him. Very good guy, in my opinion. Well-respected around the league, well-liked around the league. And I think it's tough because, look, did this GM hire him? No. And every GM comes in with his own list of guys. And every GM comes in, thinking, he wants to put his imprint on the franchise, and one way to do that is your head coach. And so that, they've gotten along. Obviously, things have gone fine so far, but that could be, an issue moving forward just because Colangelo may want to bring in his own guy.
Wrapping up with Chris Broussard, and we'll mention your great podcast and have you promoted in just a few seconds. Let's get to the Knicks. Knicks only 2 games out of an 8th seed, and it's been a disappointing year for the Knicks, but one that I didn't really expect this Knicks team to be as great as some players maybe in that organization thought it would be. In order for the Knicks to have a good run,
a super team?
Yeah. That was ridiculous by Derrick Rose. But in order for them to have a good run from here on out and make the playoffs, what needs to go right for the Knicks?
Well, look, they certainly have the talent in the Eastern Conference to make the playoffs. I was with you in what I predicted in the beginning of the season that they wouldn't make the playoffs, I believe. And it wasn't because of lack of talent. It was because I thought they would have problems kind of coming together with their chemistry. Their biggest problem right now has been their defense. It hadn't even been, I mean, Derrick Rose missed one game. It was terrible what he did. I thought he should have gotten a 5-game suspension. But that said, it doesn't seem like the players are down on him. It seems like this is going to be able to get brushed aside, and they're going to be able to play with him. So that said, their biggest problem is defense. I mean, they're absolutely one of the worst defensive teams in the league. And what I don't like is what I heard from Coach Jeff Hornacek about a week or week and a half ago when he was talking about their defense. He was admitting that it's terrible, and what he said was that we may not have the guys that are capable of playing defense. That's ridiculous. In the NBA, it's not about having 5 outstanding lockdown defenders. You know, it's about your team defensive scheme. And when you look at, if you have the athleticism and the strength and the technique, then you can be a great defense or a good defensive player. If I'm quick enough to keep you in front of me, then I can be a good defensive player. Then it's all about, do I want to be, or am I being pushed to be? Most great defensive teams have coaches that harp on it, that have practices where that's all they talk about. And I want to hear, I believe, look, Derrick Rose has been a part of great defensive teams in Chicago. So is Joakim Noah, obviously. And Noah, even though he's lost a step, it still can be a solid defender. Don't tell me guys like Kyle O'Quinn and Willie Hernan-Gomez can't be adequate defenders. That's all they should be focused on, because I don't need them to score a ton. Carmelo, okay, I'm going to have to protect him, but you can protect players in a good defensive scheme. Porzingis doesn't have strength, but he's got the length and athleticism to be a decent defender at this point in his career. We know Courtney Lee is a good defender. You know, so they can be an adequate defensive team, and the fact that they're not tells me Hornacek, one, doesn't have a scheme, and I know Kurt Rambis is their defensive guy, but they don't have a defensive scheme yet that's good enough. And two, they're not pushing it. They're not holding these players accountable, and Hornacek's statement is evidence of that. So that's their biggest problem. If they fix that, then I think they can make a push for the playoffs or get in the playoffs.
Getting back to your Rose comments on wanting and advocating for a suspension, at first I thought, all right, a suspension may be too far, but then after thinking about it and what happened, and I understand if someone has a family issue, but all he has to do is just take a text to someone in the Knicks organization, and he didn't do that. So is that your thought process on why you wanted a suspension?
Yeah. I mean, you've got to show as a franchise that you've got some backbone and that you're going to hold players and everyone, for that matter, accountable. And I'm with you. I've talked to people about this. From what I'm told and what the Knicks have been told, Derrick had a legitimate family issue, and he was distraught, and so were his brothers, you know, who would make the call to the Knicks or whatever. But that's no excuse. Look, no matter how distraught I am, if I know I'm scheduled to be on television tonight, and they're counting on me to be on a show or do sideline reporting for a game or whatever it might be, then even if something tragic happens, one of my first thoughts is, okay, I'm going to have to get out of work. I can't work tonight. Let me call the station. Any rational person, that's the case. That's why a lot of people don't believe what Derrick is selling. And I'm not going to judge it, because I'm like you. I don't want to go there when it's a personal or family issue. But there's no excuse. A death in the family, you still think, if they're counting on you, it's not like it's an off day. You know, not like you practiced in the morning and now I'm done for the day. They're counting on you to be there. That comes into everyone's thought process, let me call him. And Derrick didn't have to be the one to call him. Have your agent, have one of your handlers, have one of your brothers call them. But you've got to call. And so, yeah, you got to – a 5-game suspension, I think, is appropriate. You know, so – and Derrick's in a position where, in my opinion, he can't make a stink about it. He's going to be a free agent next year. He wants a max deal. I know he's not getting that anywhere, but he wants a max deal. You've already gone AWOL. That's made people wonder about you. Now you're going to get all upset about it if they suspend you. Nah, you better just take it and then be a good soldier and come and play your best if you want that max deal. So I think, yeah, they should have suspended him.
Chris, last one on the NBA before we let you run, as we're talking to Chris Broussard, who does a great job covering the NBA for FS1. I just want to throw one more Knicks question at you. In terms of James Dolan, how much more patience is he going to have with this? And then in terms of Phil Jackson, how much longer do you think he wants to do this role with the mess of the situation they're in right now?
Well, look, it's a mess a lot of times. In fact, more often than not in New York, it's a mess. Phil Jackson has not been terrific, but he hasn't been a disaster either. A lot of people going to say that, oh, look at the Derrick Rose situation. Look at the Derek Fisher situation. Man, come on. New York is always full of drama. Before Phil, it was drama with Isaiah Thomas. Before Isaiah Thomas, there was drama with Jeff Van Gundy when he just quit the job, out of the blue. Then you had a host of bad coaches or bad, coaches that didn't have any success. Lenny Wilkins got fired. Larry Brown, there was drama. I mean, this is not new. This is not something Phil created. This is New York. They create drama. Now, what I'll say about Phil, has he been perfect? Heck, no, not by any stretch. But he has gotten you what you have not had since Patrick Ewing, and that is a cornerstone player. Now, Carmelo, he's a cornerstone player, but look, he hasn't been able to do it. It's just as simple as that. I think he's a Hall of Famer, but he's not been able to even get this team in the playoffs for the most part in the weak Eastern Conference. So, but Porzingis is that building block of the future. This is a guy who could lead your team to contender status for the next 15 years. And so at the very least, you have to give Phil Jackson credit for that. You can talk about Porzingis fell in his lap. You can talk about if they would have had a top 3 pick, he wouldn't have taken him. So what? He did get him. And it's under his watch. Just like you have to discredit him or, blame him for the bad, even if he had nothing to do with it because he's the final stop, he's the final say, you have to give him credit for the good, even if he didn't know it all because he's the final say. So I think, they got to figure out a way to build around Porzingis. I don't think Phil's been a disaster. Hopefully he wants to stay the final 2 years of his deal. And that's one of the problems with New York. They got no patience. I mean, look at New York. You have had legends fail in New York. Lenny Wilkins, Hall of Famer. They fire him when he's 40 and 41. 40 and 41. Come on, and you get fired? You didn't have the greatest talent in the world. Larry Brown, a legend, after one season, fired. Isaiah Thomas, legendary player, did a good job as a coach in Indiana. Had a tremendous draft record. Now, there were some issues going on, but he had a tremendous draft record from New York. Fired him. He failed there. I mean, now you're going to run Phil Jackson out the door after 3 years? I mean, again, he needs to shut up. He needs to quit, talking about LeBron James and some other players. But why? That's New York, and that's one of their problems, and that's why they're perennially either mediocre or bad, because they don't have any patience. Have patience with Phil Jackson and let him see this contract out. You're paying him enough and see what they can do.
Well, Chris, as a New Yorker, I could tell you, I have no patience. So I have to wait in traffic, and I start beeping my horn, and I go crazy. So my patience is at an all-time low.
I'm right? I covered this team for the New York Times. If you lose 3 games in a row, there are people writing about fire the coach.
Oh, yeah, you're exactly right.
They were going, that's not how, look at the best franchises in the league. I mean, Golden State, obviously, it's easy to have stability right now when you're Golden State. But look at San Antonio, the model. You got to have some type of stability. And again, it hasn't been that disastrous. You still have a chance to make the playoffs.
But that doesn't mean much because the East stinks.
I agree. But what's the alternatives? You know, what
Nothing.
What are you trying to do with it? Yeah, Mike Woodson. And he was not a legend, don't get me wrong.
He was a 2 seed.
But Mike Woodson led them to 54 wins in the second round. He was winning a high percentage of his games and a little drop-off, and they fired him. That's my point. Like, you have to have some patience because you've got to give guys the security to be able to do what they want to do without looking over their shoulder all the time. And so, again, I'm not saying Phil's been, it's done everything right. I'm just saying he got Porzingis. Let them figure this thing out. It just doesn't deserve to be blown up at this point.
All right, Chris, before we let you go, tell me about this podcast that you're doing now.
Yeah, this week I started an In the Zone podcast with Chris Broussard, and it's on iTunes and SoundCloud. It's just going to be my take on the NBA. Sometimes I'll broaden out and talk other things, but for the most part, it's an NBA podcast. And I would encourage all your listeners. It's done well, very well, this debut week. So I would encourage all the listeners to check it out and subscribe to it. I think you'll enjoy it. It mixes in some fun hip-hop elements. So it's a fun but also informative podcast. And this week's topic is who is the MVP right now, Russell Westbrook or James Harden?
Who do you go with?
You have to tune into the podcast.
Hey, that's a good promotional man you are,
that.
Chris Broussard. Yeah, I know. I'll go Harden right now. But, Chris, we appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
All right, my man.